Hi, I'm Aaron Edwards, and this is my persuasive argument speech. I'm wearing, for my ensemble today, I'm getting old, hold on. There we go. My name is Aaron Edwards, and my speech today is entitled, How to Shake a Spear in Defense of Strangers. And strangers in this case are immigrants, or aliens as they've been called. If I was to tell you that if you are concerned about the violence taking place today, you should study and learn about a riot, a mob, an attack against a nation's capital that took place by a group of racist white men and a few white women, but and it was anti-immigrant, it was xenophobic, with the intent to harm innocent people who come to a country to help build it up during a time of global pandemic in which there was economic downturn and people were looking for a scapegoat in order to blame. And in this case, they blamed immigrants for taking their jobs that they didn't want to do, in most cases are not able to do. You would be forgiven, or could be forgiven, for thinking that I'm talking about the January 6th, 2021 insurrection against our nation's capital by a bunch of racist, anti-immigrant ruffians. But in this case, I'm actually talking about May Day, 1517, when in London, London was attacked by a group of nationalist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant young men and a few women, about 1,000, who tried to forcefully expel and kill and take the property of immigrants who were living in London at the time, who had been brought there because of the devastating effect of a global pandemic that was caused by the yersinia bacteria, also known as bubonic plague, or the Black Plague, Black Death. And it devastated the ecology, the economy. Europe, up to 60% of the population died, and it kept coming back in waves, so that by the time this event in May 17th took place, there would be these waves when things would shut down and people would have to quarantine, and people look for scapegoats in that time of frustration. And in this case, 1,000 young men on May Day went out and started attacking the businesses and homes of immigrants in the Cheapside area of London, which is the Wall Street of London. It's one of the financial centers. And the king, Henry VIII, sent out his lawyer, who is St. Thomas, or at that time Sir Thomas More. And Thomas More was serving as the deputy sheriff of London at the time, which is the main sheriff's the figurehead. The deputy sheriff has to do all the dirty work. So he went out and tried to quell this mob and was unable to do so. And they arrested about 300 people, and King Henry VIII started cutting off their heads until Catherine of Aragon pleaded in their behalf. But it was an infamous day. It was felt throughout the history of England, and certainly Shakespeare, who's born maybe 50 years afterward, is a young man just starting out, a playwright, when he decides to take up a script for a play about the May Day riots. Young Shakespeare, this is about the 1590s, would have had access to this new idea of other lands besides Europe, Asia, and Africa. And with this expanded consciousness and these successive waves of plague that were hitting the London city, to the point where they shut down the theaters. And so you have this playwright who doesn't have a job now. and is watching this all take place. And he decides to write a speech that is in a play that never gets published at the time because it was seen by the crown as inciting a riot and too controversial. And so he writes about immigrants. Now in the play they're called strangers or aliens, but they're immigrants, people who come from a different land in order to find work and a new life in a country. And he gives to Thomas More the words of a speech, which I'm going to share today, with some updates, I guess, to help make it easier to understand and to see how it really does have parallels with our own current violence that is out there, wherein people who are armed and dangerous say that they attacked children in most cases, and certainly innocents, and they say that their legal case in the trials are because they felt threatened and that they had to, thus being armed, shoot these unarmed people. And so in the play, one of the rioters yells out to Thomas More, remove them forcefully from our land. And Thomas More looks at them and says, all right, let's play this tape forward and see where this gets you. And says, in Shakespeare's words, with some updated for today, grant them removed, and then grant that this your noise hath cut down all the majesty of England, or in our case, the Constitution. Imagine that you see these wretched strangers with their babies at their backs, and with their poor luggage plodding toward the ports and coasts for transportation. And you sit as kings in your desires, with authority utterly overwhelmed by your noise, and you in rough of your opinion clothed, what have you got? I'll tell you. You have taught how insolence and insurrection should prevail, how to undermine the authority and confidence in the Constitution. And by this pattern, not one of you should live to be an aged man, for other ruffians, as they suppose, with self-same reasons, self-righteousness, and self-armament, decide to attack you and shark on you, and then men, like ravenous fishes, can go feed upon one another. And then Thomas More makes an appeal to their humanity and says, "O wretched, wretched men, wash this foul idea from your minds, and with the same hands that you do lift up against these children, against this people, lift up in defense of this people. And with your knees kneel and seek forgiveness. You will put down strangers," he says, "kill them. Why? To possess their property, and lead the majesty of law and line to slip him like a hound." But then he points out that doesn't work that way, and that in the end, he says, you will be caught and brought to trial. But let's say that the king, who is clement, decides but to banish you. Where would you go? Go you to Russia? To France? To any of Germany's provinces, or Spain, Portugal, really anywhere that does not adhere to the crown or the United States? Why, then you would be the stranger. How would you feel to be amongst a country of such barbarous intent that they literally mount up in violence just to ensure that they afford no abode for you on this earth, but instead whet their detested knives against your throat and spurn you like dogs, and like as if God owned not, nor made not you, nor that the elements are not altogether appropriate for your needs, but rather chartered solely unto them and theirs? how would you feel to be thus used? Because this is the stranger's case against you. And this is your mountainish inhumanity. And with that, the speech ends and the riot continues. What I think is important about the speech and why you should learn it is it arms us rhetorically for the arguments brought forth by these people. That because they feel it is unsafe, this country now, they, with their arms, should make it right. And I think if fate were to write this whole play, it is interesting that the only handwriting we have of Shakespeare, the only surviving writing that we have of any of his plays, is not a snippet of Romeo and Juliet or some page from a folio for Hamlet, but it's actually the only writing we have of Shakespeare's creatively, besides signing some banknotes and things like that, is this speech by Thomas More to the mob in an effort to protect the immigrants. And it is now housed in the Royal Museum of London. And it's important because it doesn't just happen in a vague way against the country as a whole or these people as a whole, but if you look at the legal cases that happened with George Zimmerman, who murdered a child, for 3 men who ran down a jogger, Ahmed Arbery, and gunned him down, they all say as their argument that they did not feel safe and they were doing this out of protective. And to include this monster who drives a Dodge into a crowded group of people at Charlottesville and ends up murdering Heather Hare, said that he didn't feel safe. And so you should, in times like this, find strength in understanding that this has happened and will continue to happen, but that we have good people on our side like Thomas More and Shakespeare who have helped us come up with an argument against this, which is to say, this is the stranger's case. This is the legal case for immigrants against you people. If you want to know more about this, you should, worst case scenario, go to Wikipedia and look up Evil May Day, and then that will get you some good books on the subject. But there's one on Great Harry, The Extravagant Life of Henry VIII, Encyclopedia of London Crime, and even the Royal Museum that houses this has really good books and information and pictures and data on all this. Thank you.